There is nothing you need to focus on right now, nothing you need to remember, nothing you need to imagine clearly. This video is simply a quiet place where a single idea can exist in the background. Tonight's story is called How People Slept Before Beds, Mattresses and Pillows Existed. You don't need to follow the details. You don't need to stay awake for the explanations. If the sound fades in and out of your attention, that's perfectly fine. Let the voice stay in the room, and let your body do what it already knows how to do. Long before bedrooms existed, before mattresses were stacked in layers, before pillows were shaped and softened, sleep was something far simpler and far quieter. For most of human history, rest did not happen in a separate room. It did not happen on a raised surface, and it did not happen at a scheduled hour. Sleep happened wherever the day finally ended, when the light faded, when the work slowed, when the body grew heavy. People rested. There was no expectation of comfort, only a gradual return to stillness. In early human settlements, the idea of a bed did not exist. There were no frames, no springs, no soft coverings made for the body. The ground itself was enough. Sometimes it was bare earth, sometimes packed soil, sometimes stone floors that held the cold of the night, and still, people slept, not deeply, not perfectly, but regularly. Sleep was not something to improve, it was something to accept. As night arrived, families gathered closer together, not for warmth alone, but for safety. Firelight flickered, shadows moved slowly along walls, and eventually, the fire faded. When darkness became complete, the body learned to rest in pieces. Sleep came in short waves, moments of drifting, followed by quiet awareness, then drifting again. This pattern was normal, natural, expected. There was no pressure to sleep through the night. The night itself was divided. A first sleep, a long pause of restfulness, and then a second sleep. Between these moments, people would sit quietly, stretch their limbs, or simply stare into the dark. There was no anxiety about being awake, no clock measuring lost hours. Wakefulness was part of rest. As the centuries passed, simple materials were added to the ground. Dry grass, leaves, animal skins, not for luxury, but for insulation. The body needed separation from cold earth more than softness, and even then nothing resembled a mattress. The body adjusted instead. Muscles relaxed into uneven surfaces, spines curved naturally, limbs found their own position. There was no correct posture, only stillness. Most people slept on their sides, sometimes curled, sometimes flat, often changing position throughout the night. Movement during sleep was normal. Staying perfectly still for hours was not expected or desired. As villages formed and houses became more permanent, sleep moved indoors, but the ground remained the bed. Floors were swept clean, sometimes covered with straw, sometimes with woven mats. These mats were thin, firm, barely noticeable. They did not cradle the body. They reminded the body where it was, and that was enough. Pillows, as we know them, did not exist. The head rested wherever it fell, sometimes on an arm, sometimes on folded fabric, often on nothing at all. Necks strengthened over time, bodies adapted. Discomfort was not named as a problem. It was simply part of being alive. In colder regions, sleep happened closer to the fire. Ashes still warm beneath stone, smoke lingering faintly in the air, the smell of wood, the sound of wind outside, and the quiet breathing of others nearby. These were the signals of night, not silence, not darkness alone, but familiarity. As you imagine this world, there is no need to picture details clearly. Just notice how little was required for rest to begin. No preparation, no routine, no perfect environment, only a slowing of the day. Even animals nearby slept in similar ways. Dogs curled close to humans, livestock settled into straw, The entire settlement exhaled together. Night was not entertainment. It was absence. Absence of movement. Absence of work. Absence of expectation. And sleep came naturally, because nothing asked it not to. Long pause. Breathing space. Night did not change suddenly. There was no single moment in history when people decided to sleep differently. Change happened slowly, almost without notice. For a long time, the ground remained the place of rest. But humans began to understand something very simple. Cold travelled upward. When the body touched the earth for too long, the warmth slowly disappeared. So the first real change in sleep was not about comfort. It was about separation. Not height, just distance. A thin layer placed between the body and the ground below. In many early homes, this layer was straw. Dry, brittle straw, spread carefully across the floor. It made a faint sound when moved. It smelled of the field it came from, and it shifted during the night. Straw did not soften the surface, it only changed the temperature. People still felt the floor beneath them. They still woke up stiff, but they woke up less cold. In some regions, leaves replaced straw. Large leaves dried in the sun, then stacked in loose piles. These were lighter, they compressed easily, and by morning they were almost flat again. So every night the bed was rebuilt. There was no permanent sleeping place. Sleep was temporary, just like the night. In colder climates, animal skins became common, not decorative, not luxurious, just practical. The fur trapped heat, the leather blocked moisture. These skins were rough, uneven, sometimes still carrying the smell of the animal, but they worked. People slept wrapped, not supported. The body stayed warm, even if the surface stayed hard. As communities grew, homes became more enclosed. Walls thickened, roofs lowered. The inside air changed. Smoke lingered longer. Sounds softened. Wind became distant. Sleep moved deeper indoors. But even then, the sleeping place was rarely private. Families slept together. Children near parents. Elders near warmth. Privacy was not expected. Solitude was not associated with rest. Safety came from closeness. At night, the body relaxed only when others were nearby. This closeness shaped sleep itself. People became used to small movements, quiet breathing, occasional turning. Sleep was not silence, it was shared stillness. During this time, sleeping positions remained flexible. There were no rules, no correct alignment, no concern about posture. The body chose what it needed. Some slept curled tightly, protecting the chest. Others slept flat, arms spread loosely. The ground allowed no indulgence, so the body adapted instead. And adaptation became normal. There was no comparison, no idea that sleep could be improved. The idea of better sleep did not exist, only enough sleep. As centuries passed, woven materials appeared, simple mats, made from reeds, rushes, thin plant fibres. These mats were firm, flat, predictable. They marked the first time a sleeping surface was intentionally shaped, still not soft, but deliberate. Mats were rolled out at night and rolled away by morning. The sleeping place disappeared with the sun. Rooms served many purposes: eating, working, sleeping. Nothing was dedicated only to rest. This meant sleep had to adapt. People learned to fall asleep quickly. They did not wait for perfect conditions. Darkness came, and rest followed. Noise did not prevent sleep. It blended into it. The crack of wood, the distant call of animals, the shifting of someone nearby. All of it became part of the background. The brain learned what to ignore. There were no artificial lights. Firelight faded naturally. Candles burned low. Darkness arrived gradually, giving the body time to slow down. This natural transition was one of the greatest sleep aids. No sudden brightness, no screens, no sharp contrasts, just a slow dimming of the world. In this time, sleep was shorter, but more frequent. People often rested shortly after sunset, woke during the night, and rested again before dawn. The night was not a single block. It was a series of quiet intervals. Between these intervals, wakefulness was calm. No anxiety, no frustration. Being awake at night was not considered a failure. It was simply part of the rhythm. This rhythm shaped how people felt about rest. Sleep was not something to chase. It arrived when it arrived. And when it left gently. As materials improved, layers increased. A mat, then a skin, then perhaps a cloth, not stacked for softness, but for warmth and durability. Still, the surface remained firm, spines stayed active, muscles stayed engaged. The body did not sink. It rested on top of the night, not inside it. Because of this, people changed position often. They shifted without waking fully. Movement was natural. There was no idea that stillness was required. Sleep was dynamic. As you listen to this, there is no need to imagine discomfort. The people of this time did not experience it as discomfort. It was simply normal. The body adapts remarkably well when there is no alternative to compare. Comfort is relative. Without soft beds, the ground felt acceptable. Without pillows, the arm felt sufficient. Without silence, quiet noise felt safe. And sleep continued, slowly, naturally, without effort. For a very long time, the ground was enough. But human spaces changed. Homes became more permanent. Floors stayed dry longer. Animals were kept slightly farther away. And with these changes, sleep slowly began to rise. Not upward toward comfort, but away from danger. Insects crawled at night. Moisture settled near the ground. Cold lingered close to the earth. So people lifted themselves just a little. The earliest raised sleeping surfaces were not beds. They were platforms, simple wooden frames, rough planks laid side by side, sometimes stone slabs, sometimes packed earth shaped higher. They were low, barely above the floor. Their purpose was not softness. It was separation. A small boundary between the body and everything that moved below. These platforms were hard, unforgiving. If anything, they were less comfortable than the ground, but they felt safer. And safety has always mattered more than comfort when it comes to sleep. On these platforms, people placed what they already had. Straw, mats, animal skins. Nothing new, just rearranged. The body still felt firmness. The spine still carried weight. But the night felt different. Air moved underneath. Cold behaved differently. Small creatures stayed away. Sleep adapted again. These early platforms were shared. Several people, side by side, sometimes overlapping. Personal space was minimal, but closeness meant warmth, and warmth meant rest. The idea of an individual bed did not exist. Sleep was communal. Privacy was rare and unnecessary. In many homes, the raised platform also served other purposes. During the day, it was a place to sit, to work, to store items underneath. At night, it became a sleeping surface. Nothing was dedicated solely to sleep, because life itself was not divided that way. Day and night flowed into each other. As darkness approached, the platform slowly filled. People lay down when tired, not at a fixed time. Sleep followed fatigue, not schedules. There were no rituals designed to improve sleep, no routines meant to optimize rest. The body simply responded to the day. If the day was long, sleep came easily. If the day was light, sleep came gently. There was no struggle. As raised surfaces became more common, they changed how the body rested. The firmness remained, but the slight elevation allowed the chest to open more easily. Breathing felt different. Some people noticed this. Most did not. It simply became normal. Pillows still did not exist. The head rested on arms, on folded cloth, or directly on the surface below. Necks grew strong. Muscles adjusted. Pain was not labelled. It was not tracked. It was not discussed. There was no expectation that sleep should remove all discomfort. Sleep was for recovery, not perfection. In colder regions, these platforms were placed closer to heat, near hearths, near walls that held warmth. At night, the last embers glowed softly. The room stayed dim, never fully dark, never fully bright. This gentle light kept the brain relaxed. There was no sudden transition. As eyes closed, the glow faded naturally, and sleep followed. Noise remained. The sounds of wind, the settling of wood, quiet voices. These sounds did not interrupt sleep, they defined it. Silence was unfamiliar and unnecessary. In fact, complete silence would have felt unsafe. Noise meant life was nearby, and life meant protection. Sleep depended on that sense of presence. As centuries passed, platforms became more refined. Wood was shaped more evenly. Surfaces became flatter, still firm, still simple, but intentional. This was the beginning of structure. Not comfort, just structure. Some platforms were fixed, built into walls, part of the house itself. Others were movable, but all shared the same idea. Sleep deserved its own place, even if that place was still hard. As sleep moved upward, the relationship with the ground changed. People no longer felt every vibration, every movement. The night felt calmer. This subtle separation allowed longer periods of rest, not deeper sleep, but more continuous sleep. Awakenings still happened, but they were gentler. The body rested a little longer before drifting back. This change was gradual. No one noticed it happening. There were no written records saying, "Sleep is better now." It simply felt normal, and normal shifted quietly. As raised sleeping surfaces spread, they remained limited. Only some households had them. Others stayed on the floor. There was no hierarchy of sleep, no belief that one way was superior. Both were accepted. Both worked. The human body is adaptable. It has always been. Sleep finds a way as long as the body feels safe enough to let go. And safety did not require softness. It required familiarity. As you listen now, there is no need to compare. No need to imagine what it would feel like. Just notice how slowly sleep has changed. Not through innovation, but through small adjustments. Tiny steps, barely noticed. For a long time, sleep looked the same for almost everyone. Raised slightly above the ground, firm, shared, and simple. But as societies grew more complex, something new entered the sleeping space. Difference. Not difference in need, but difference in resources. Some people had more materials, more space, more control over their surroundings. And slowly, sleep began to reflect that. Not in comfort at first, but in separation. In larger homes, sleeping platforms became wider, not softer, just larger. This extra space was not meant for relaxation. It was meant for distinction. Who slept where started to matter. Some people slept closer to warmth, some farther away, some slept higher, some lower. These differences were subtle, but they were noticed. For the first time, sleep became something that could signal position. Still, most people slept much the same way. Firm surfaces, thin layers, shared spaces. Luxury, as we understand it, was still absent, but small changes continued. In certain homes, platforms were raised higher, not inches, but enough to create space underneath. This space was useful. Storage, protection from dampness, and sometimes privacy. Curtains appeared, not thick, not decorative. Simple cloth hung loosely. They blocked drafts, they softened light, and they created a boundary. Not complete isolation, but a suggestion of it. Sleep became quieter, not silent, just quieter. These curtains did not exist everywhere. They were rare, and because they were rare, they were noticed. Sleep inside them felt different. The body relaxed slightly more, not because of softness, but because of enclosure. The brain responded to boundaries, even simple ones. Still, the surface beneath the body remained firm, straw, mats, skins, layered slightly more carefully, but never thick, never yielding. The idea of sinking into sleep had not yet arrived. People rested on sleep, not inside it. Pillows remained uncommon. In some regions, hard headrests appeared, carved from wood or shaped from stone. They were not meant to cushion, they were meant to elevate. These headrests kept hair arranged, kept insects away from the face, kept the head cooler. They were practical, uncomfortable by modern standards, but effective for their purpose. The neck adapted. Pain was still not a topic. It was not measured. It was not tracked. The body adjusted quietly. As sleeping spaces became more defined, sleep itself changed slightly. People slept longer in one stretch, not because they were more comfortable, but because they were more protected. Protection from cold, from drafts, from noise. Safety deepens rest, always has. In wealthier homes, rooms dedicated to sleeping appeared, not for everyone, but for some. These rooms were not decorated for comfort. They were functional, smaller, warmer, easier to heat. Sleep moved into these enclosed spaces because they conserved warmth, not because they were pleasant. In these rooms, light faded more completely. Candles burned low, shadows softened. Darkness felt heavier. Sleep responded. The body slowed earlier. There were fewer distractions. This allowed longer rest. But still, sleep was not continuous. Waking during the night remained normal. People expected it. They used the time quietly, stretching, sitting, sometimes praying, sometimes simply waiting. There was no frustration, no sense of failure. Being awake at night was just another state. As wealth increased in certain places, materials improved. Cloth became more available. Blankets appeared. Not thick, not plush, just layers. These blankets trapped warmth. They did not cushion. The body still felt the surface below, but warmth increased, and warmth encourages stillness. As the body moved less, sleep stretches grew longer. This was gradual, barely noticed, but it mattered. In colder climates, sleeping garments became common. Simple night clothing, not soft, not tailored, just additional layers. Sleep was still a physical act. The body prepared itself. There were no rituals meant to calm the mind. The mind followed the body. When the body slowed, the mind followed. There was no separation. As social structures became clearer, sleeping arrangements reflected them. Some slept alone, some slept in groups, some slept higher, some slept near the floor. These differences were not questioned. They were accepted as part of life. But the core of sleep remained unchanged. Firm surfaces, limited softness, natural rhythms. There was still no concept of optimizing sleep. No advice, no experts. Sleep was instinctive. It was trusted. As you listen now, you don't need to imagine these differences clearly. Just notice how slowly sleep became shaped by environment and structure, not by desire. People did not ask for better sleep. They adjusted to what existed, and sleep continued to arrive, night after night, without instruction. For centuries, sleep had remained firm, not because people preferred it, but because nothing else existed. Comfort was not a goal. It was not discussed. It was not imagined. But slowly, materials changed. Not because of sleep, but because of daily life. Cloth became easier to produce. Wool was cleaned more carefully. Fibers were spun tighter. These changes were not meant for beds. They were meant for clothing, for warmth, for work. But at night, extra fabric found its way into the sleeping space. Blankets grew thicker. Not soft by design, just layered. When folded, they created padding. Not much, but enough to be noticed. This was the first time sleeping surfaces began to yield slightly under the body. People did not describe this as comfort. They described it as warmth, and warmth mattered. As blankets increased, people moved less during the night. The body stayed still longer. Sleep stretches grew quietly longer. No one recorded this change. No one commented on it. It simply became normal. In some regions, stuffed sacks appeared, filled with straw, hay, dried grasses. These sacks were not called mattresses. They were storage items used for sitting, for resting, and eventually for sleeping. They were uneven, lumpy, often uncomfortable, but they softened pressure points. Hips sank slightly, shoulders rested a bit more easily. The body responded. Sleep deepened, not dramatically, but enough to notice. Again, no one celebrated this change. It was accepted quietly. These sacks were not common. They were difficult to maintain. The filling shifted, compressed, broke down. They had to be opened, refilled, reshaped. So they were used sparingly, often placed on top of platforms or directly on the floor. Layers continued to matter more than softness. The idea of a single soft surface was still far away. Pillows also began to appear, but not as we know them. Small sacks, stuffed with herbs or cloth scraps. They were firm. Their purpose was elevation, not cushioning. They lifted the head slightly, helped breathing, kept hair arranged, reduced insects. Comfort was still secondary, but something subtle happened. The head no longer rested on bone or wood. The neck relaxed just a little, and that small change mattered. As softness entered sleep accidentally, sleep itself responded. People began sleeping longer in one position. Movement decreased. Awakenings became fewer, though still expected. The night began to feel smoother, still not perfect, still interrupted, but gentler. As households accumulated more materials, sleeping layers increased. A mat, a sack, a blanket, another blanket, none designed to work together. But together they changed how sleep felt. The body no longer rested on a single hard plane. Pressure was distributed, muscle softened faster. The transition into sleep became slightly easier. Still, sleep was not treated as fragile. Noise remained, light remained. Sleep adapted. People still fell asleep quickly. There was no struggle, because expectations were low. No one expected sleep to solve everything. It was simply rest. As softness increased, the idea of personal sleeping spaces strengthened. People preferred certain spots, certain arrangements, but these preferences were flexible. If needed, sleep happened anywhere, on benches, on floors, near fires. The body remained adaptable. Softness did not weaken resilience, it supplemented it. As you listen now, notice how change did not come from desire. It came from excess, extra fabric, extra materials. Sleep benefited accidentally. No one chased improvement, and because of that, sleep remained calm. There was no anxiety about sleeping well, no pressure to perform rest correctly. Sleep arrived because nothing pushed it away. In wealthier homes, sleeping sacks became more refined, filled with wool or feathers. These were rare, difficult to clean, expensive to maintain. They were signs of abundance. But even these early soft surfaces were nothing like modern beds. They compressed quickly, lost shape, shifted constantly. They required frequent adjustment. Sleep was still active, the body still participated, and because of that, sleep remained natural. As softness grew, people did not sleep longer overall. They slept differently, less movement, more continuity. But wakefulness still appeared, and when it did, it was accepted. No clocks tracked lost hours. No frustration followed. The night remained gentle. For most of history, sleep arrived on its own. It followed the day. It followed the body. There was very little preparation, but as materials increased and homes became more controlled, something subtle changed. People began preparing for sleep, not emotionally, not mentally, physically. They arranged layers, they chose locations, they adjusted warmth. Sleep was still natural, but it began slightly earlier. As evening approached, people started thinking ahead. Where will I rest tonight? This was new, not planning in detail, just awareness. The sleeping surface became something that could be adjusted. A sack fluffed slightly. A blanket folded twice instead of once. A mat moved closer to warmth. These were small decisions, but they mattered. Sleep responded to consistency. As sleeping places became more predictable, the body recognized them. Lying down in a familiar arrangement signaled rest, not because of comfort, but because of repetition. The brain learns patterns quietly. As softness increased slightly, sleep deepened slightly. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but enough to notice longer stretches of stillness. People did not celebrate this. They did not write about it. They simply slept. Pillows became more common, but remained firm, stuffed with straw, or cloth scraps, or dried plants. They were uneven, often lumpy, but they lifted the head. This changed breathing. Airways stayed open more easily. Snoring softened. Sleep felt calmer. Again, this was not recognized as improvement. It was accepted as normal. In some places, sleeping sacks were sewn closed. They held their filling better. They shifted less. This reduced nightly adjustment. Sleep became more continuous, still interrupted, but less frequently. As nights became longer in colder seasons, people spent more time resting. Not sleeping deeply, but resting quietly. Lying down longer allowed the body to drift in and out naturally. There was no pressure to stay asleep. Waking was neutral. Rest did not depend on unconsciousness. This distinction mattered, because it removed anxiety. As people rested more, sleep quality improved indirectly. The body did not rush. It took its time. As households stabilized, children learned sleep patterns early. They watched adults rest. They copied behavior. Sleep was not taught. It was observed. Children learned that night was quiet time, not playtime, not work time, just stillness. This taught the nervous system to slow down without instruction. As sleep preparation became routine, the environment changed too. Light was reduced earlier, candles were extinguished sooner. The evening dimmed gradually. This gradual darkness supported sleep naturally. There was no sharp cut-off, no sudden signal, just a slow fade. As you listen now, notice how preparation did not mean stimulation. It meant simplification. Fewer movements, less light, less activity. Sleep was invited quietly. Noise also softened, not eliminated, but reduced. The loud work of the day ended. Voices lowered, movement slowed. This transition mattered. Sleep does not arrive well after sudden excitement. It follows calm. As sleeping surfaces improved slightly, people stayed in bed longer after waking. They did not jump up immediately. They rested. This allowed the body to complete cycles. Sleep felt more complete, still not perfect, still fragmented, but gentler. As communities grew, shared sleeping spaces became more organized. People knew where they would rest. This predictability reduced vigilance. The brain relaxed earlier. Sleep followed. In wealthier households, sleeping furniture became more elaborate. Frames were carved. Platforms were shaped. But the surface remained firm, even when sacks were placed on top. True softness was still rare, and perhaps because of this, sleep remained reliable. The body did not depend on perfect conditions. It adapted. As you drift now, there is no need to imagine details. Just notice how sleep slowly became something people prepared for, without pressure, without obsession. Preparation was practical, not emotional, and because of that, sleep stayed calm. For a long time, sleep accepted whatever existed. The body adapted, the mind followed. But gradually something new entered the night. Expectation, not suddenly, not loudly, quietly. As sleeping surfaces became more familiar, more predictable, people began to notice differences. Not everyone slept the same anymore. Some slept warmer, some slept softer, some slept higher. And these differences were felt. For the first time, sleep could be compared, and comparison changed how people thought about rest. In homes where stuffed sacks and layered blankets were common, sleep felt smoother. The body sank just a little. Pressure eased slightly. People did not call this luxury, but they noticed it. And once something is noticed, it becomes part of memory. The body remembers ease, the mind remembers relief. And slowly, sleep stopped being completely neutral. It could be better or worse. This was a turning point. As comfort became recognizable, people began to expect it again. Not consciously, just instinctively. If a sleeping sack was missing, the body noticed. If a familiar layer was gone, sleep felt unsettled. This did not create anxiety yet, but it planted a seed. Sleep was no longer entirely adaptable, it was becoming specific. In wealthier regions, sleeping furniture became more refined. Frames were raised higher, wood was smoother, edges were shaped, still firm, but deliberate. Sleeping sacks were wider, filled more evenly. Some were stitched into compartments to prevent shifting. This reduced nightly movement. Sleep deepened, not because the body was lazy, but because it was supported. The spine rested more evenly, muscles released faster, the transition into sleep shortened. People fell asleep sooner and stayed asleep slightly longer. This change was subtle, but powerful, because it changed how the night felt. The night became something that could be enjoyed, not just endured. As pillows improved, the neck relaxed more consistently. Breathing improved. The chest opened. Sleep felt calmer. Again, this was not described in words. It was felt. And feelings guide behavior. People adjusted their evenings. They rested earlier. They moved less before sleep. They protected their sleeping spaces. For the first time, sleep felt fragile. Not easily broken, but worth protecting. Noise became less welcome. Light became less tolerated. Sleep began to ask for conditions, not strict ones, just gentle ones. This was new. In earlier times, sleep adapted to the world. Now, the world began to adapt to sleep. Rooms were darkened intentionally. Candles were shielded. Drafts were blocked. These changes were practical, but their effect was psychological. The body learned that night was a protected time, and protection deepens rest. As expectations grew, sleep routines appeared. Not rituals, just habits. Laying out bedding the same way, choosing the same spot, settling in the same position. Repetition signaled safety. The brain recognized the pattern. Sleep arrived more easily, but with expectation came vulnerability. When routines were disturbed, sleep noticed. A missing pillow, a thinner blanket, an unfamiliar surface. Sleep still came, but later, lighter. This was the beginning of sleep sensitivity. Still mild, still manageable, but present. As you listen now, notice how this shift is neither good nor bad. It is simply change. Comfort improves rest, but it also narrows tolerance. The body becomes more selective. This selectivity did not yet cause struggle. It only shaped preference. People still slept without complaint. They didn't worry about sleep quality. They accepted what happened. But sleep was no longer entirely passive. It had become a relationship. As nights grew more comfortable, wakefulness during the night shortened. The first and second sleep patterns softened. People slept longer stretches, still waking, but drifting back more easily. The night felt smoother, more continuous. As expectations grew slowly, sleep became something people valued, not measured, not optimized, but respected. Disturbing someone's sleep was discouraged. Rest was recognized as necessary. This recognition shaped society quietly. Work schedules shifted slightly. Evenings slowed earlier. Night became calmer. As comfort increased, the idea of bedtime emerged. Not a strict hour, but a window. People noticed when sleep arrived best. They adjusted their days accordingly. Still instinctive, still flexible, but intentional. As you drift now, there is nothing to learn, only a feeling to notice. Sleep becoming gentler, more continuous, more expected. Still natural, still human. As comfort became familiar, sleep slowly changed its role. It was no longer just a response to tiredness. It became something that could be shaped, not controlled, not forced, but guided. This shift happened quietly, across generations. No one decided it. It emerged. As homes became more permanent, sleeping spaces became more defined. Beds were no longer temporary places. They stayed in one position, in one room, with one purpose. This alone changed the mind. The brain began to associate specific spaces with rest. Entering that space signaled slowing. Leaving it signaled waking. This separation mattered. Earlier, sleep happened wherever life paused. Now, life paused so sleep could happen. Rooms grew quieter at night. Footsteps softened. Voices lowered. Sleep gained social protection. And protection deepens trust. The body trusted night more. Sleep arrived earlier, more smoothly. As beds improved, their construction became intentional. Frames were built for stability. Surfaces were leveled carefully. Mattress fillings were chosen deliberately. Horsehair, feathers, wool. Each offered a different feel. People noticed. Some slept better on one than another. Preferences formed. This was new. For the first time, people began adjusting sleep to suit themselves, not to survive, but to feel better. Pillows multiplied. One for the head, sometimes one for the knees, sometimes one to hold. These small adjustments changed posture, reduced strain, allowed muscles to relax fully. Sleep grew deeper, not because people were more tired, but because the body felt supported. As night became more comfortable, sleep lengthened. Waking in the dark felt less necessary. The old pattern of segmented sleep continued to fade. The long unbroken sleep became more common, still not universal, but noticeable. And with longer sleep came a new experience. Dreaming became more vivid, not because dreams increased, but because people remembered them. Deep rest allows memory to surface. Dreams lingered into morning. They were discussed, interpreted, wondered about. Sleep became mysterious, and mystery invites attention. As sleep gained attention, it gained value. People noticed how they felt after a good night. Clearer, calmer, stronger. They noticed the opposite too. Poor sleep left them slow, irritable, heavy. This cause and effect was subtle, but undeniable. Sleep became important. Not sacred, not medical, just important. And importance leads to intention. Evening routines emerged, not strict rituals, but patterns. Eating earlier, moving less, dimming light, candles burned lower, shadows softened. The nervous system slowed. Without knowing it, people were preparing their brains for rest. This preparation shortened the distance between wakefulness and sleep. The transition became smoother. As sleep became smoother, nighttime fear decreased. Darkness felt less threatening. The bed felt safe. Sleep wrapped the body instead of interrupting it. As you listen now, notice how this mirrors your own experience. A familiar bed, a familiar position, a sense of safety. These are not modern inventions, they are ancient adaptations. Sleep did not change suddenly, it evolved with comfort. As design entered sleep, variation increased. Some beds were firmer, some softer, some people slept higher, some closer to the floor. Each choice shaped posture, breathing, dream depth. Sleep became personal. This personalization was still limited, but it was growing, and with personalization came awareness. People noticed when sleep felt off. They adjusted, added a layer, removed a pillow, shifted position. Sleep responded. This feedback loop strengthened the relationship. Sleep was no longer random, it was responsive. But with design came a subtle pressure. If sleep could be improved, it could also be disrupted. Expectation deepened. When comfort was missing, sleep felt incomplete. Not broken, just unsatisfying. This did not create insomnia, not yet, but it created contrast. The mind began to notice differences, and noticing is powerful. As nights became quieter and darker, the body's internal rhythms strengthened. Melatonin flowed more reliably. Sleep timing stabilized. People became sleepier at similar hours. Communities rested together. This shared rhythm reinforced rest. The night slowed collectively. As you drift now, there is no need to follow every word. Let the rhythm carry you. Design entering sleep without urgency, without control, just gentle shaping. For most of human history, sleep was something you experienced, not something you tracked. You slept, you woke, and life continued. No numbers, no charts, no comparisons. But slowly, almost without notice, that began to change. Not because people wanted control, but because curiosity grew. As societies became more organized, time itself became more precise. Hours were divided, minutes mattered. Church bells rang at specific moments. Work began at set times. Markets opened and closed by the clock. And when time became structured, sleep was pulled into that structure. People began asking simple questions. How long did I sleep? When did I go to bed? When did I wake? At first, these questions were casual. No judgment attached, just observation. Someone might say, I slept until the second bell, or I woke before dawn today. Sleep was now being placed on the timeline of the day. This did something subtle to the mind. It gave sleep a beginning and an end. Earlier, sleep simply happened. Now it had duration. Duration invited comparison. Some nights felt longer, some shorter. People noticed patterns. They began linking how they felt to how long they slept. Long sleep felt heavy but steady. Short sleep felt sharp but fragile. These observations were not scientific. They were lived, and lived knowledge is powerful. As timekeeping improved, especially in cities, sleep schedules tightened. Waking late became noticeable. Sleeping early became admirable. Sleep was slowly connected to discipline, not yet moralized, but observed. People who woke early were seen as reliable. People who slept long were seen as indulgent. This wasn't harsh, just social noticing, and social noticing shapes behavior. People adjusted bedtime not for rest, but for alignment. This was new. Sleep was no longer only about the body. It was now about fitting into the day. As night lamps improved, people stayed awake slightly longer. Candles burned brighter, oil lamps steadier. Evening extended, but morning did not. The gap between sleep need and sleep opportunity grew, still small, but growing. People compensated unconsciously. They slept deeper. The body adapted. But adaptation has limits. When sleep began to shorten, people felt it. They described it as heaviness, fog, lack of spirit, not illness, but dullness. This led to early attempts at understanding sleep quality. Not how long, but how good. People spoke of sound sleep, light sleep, broken sleep, language formed, and language shapes experience. Once sleep had categories, it could be judged. A night wasn't just a night. It was good or bad, restful or restless. This was the beginning of sleep evaluation. Still gentle, still human, no anxiety yet. But attention was turning towards sleep. Medical thinkers began noticing sleep too. They wrote about balance. Too much sleep was said to cause sluggishness. Too little caused weakness. Moderation was praised. Sleep was framed as a bodily need that could be misused. This framing mattered. It suggested that sleep had a right amount. And when there is a right amount, there is also a wrong one. People began worrying, not deeply, but faintly. Am I sleeping too much? Too little? These questions floated softly. They didn't keep people awake, not yet. But the seed was planted. As cities grew noisier, sleep became less predictable. Street sounds, voices, animals, wheels on stone. Sleep was interrupted. People adapted again. They learned to sleep through noise, but light sleep increased. Night awakenings returned. This time, not by design, but by disturbance. The old segmented sleep pattern reappeared in a new form, but without purpose. People woke annoyed, not reflective. They turned, adjusted, waited. Sleep returned, but felt thinner. This contrast sharpened awareness. People longed for deep sleep. They began to value it. Deep sleep became something to achieve, and achievement invites effort. People tried different approaches: heavier meals, lighter meals, herbal drinks, warm baths. Sleep aids emerged, not pills, but practices. Some worked, some didn't. But the attempt itself changed the relationship. Sleep was no longer passive. It was something you work toward. As you lie here now, notice how familiar this sounds. Preparing for sleep, optimizing rest. These are not modern obsessions. They are centuries old. What's modern is the intensity, but the roots are ancient. As printing spread, books carried ideas about sleep, advice columns of their time. Do not sleep after sunrise. Do not sleep immediately after eating. Sleep on your right side. Rules multiplied. Some were helpful, some harmless, some useless. But rules gave people something to follow, and following rules feels reassuring. Sleep became structured. Structure can support rest, but it can also tighten it. For now, it mostly supported. But tension was growing quietly. The night was becoming less mysterious and more mechanical. Sleep was being explained. Explained things feel manageable, but they also feel fragile. As explanations increased, people began blaming sleep for problems. Headaches, mood changes, fatigue. Sleep was no longer just rest. It was a cause, and causes can be fixed or feared. This shift took generations. No single moment, just a slow turning. As you breathe now, let this history drift around you. You don't need to hold it. Sleep itself does not need explanation to happen. Your body remembers how to rest. Even if the mind learned to analyze, there was never a single day when sleep changed. No announcement, no invention, no clear beginning. It happened slowly, so slowly that most people never noticed. Sleep did not disappear. It transformed. What was once surrendered to became something managed. And this final shift changed everything. As the modern world accelerated, time stopped being a background concept and became a ruler. Clocks moved from towers into homes, from homes into pockets, from pockets into minds. People didn't just know the time anymore, they felt watched by it. Waking up was no longer guided by light or sound or instinct. It was commanded. The alarm, sharp, unforgiving, non-negotiable. For the first time in history, millions of people were waking up in the middle of dreams, not because they had rested enough, but because time said so. This broke something subtle. Dream cycles were interrupted. Deep sleep was cut short, but the body adapted again. It always does. What the body couldn't adapt to was the mental pressure. People began waking tired even after long sleep. This was confusing. If sleep duration was increasing, why was rest decreasing? So the search began. Doctors, researchers, thinkers started dissecting sleep. They named stages: light sleep, deep sleep, REM sleep. Sleep became a process instead of an experience. Once something is broken into parts, people try to optimize it. More deep sleep, more REM, less waking, and optimization introduces anxiety, because optimization implies failure. You either slept well or you didn't. The bed, once a place of surrender, became a place of evaluation. People lay down already judging the night ahead. I need to sleep. I must fall asleep. I have to get 8 hours. These thoughts were new. Ancient humans never thought this way. Sleep came when it came. Now sleep was scheduled. And scheduled things create pressure. Pressure is the enemy of sleep. But this truth took time to emerge. Technology advanced. Lights became brighter. Screens appeared. Evenings extended endlessly. The night lost its natural boundary. The body still expected darkness. The world delivered brightness. So sleep drifted later. But wake time stayed fixed. Sleep debt accumulated. People compensated with caffeine. Energy for energy. Alertness borrowed from tomorrow. This borrowing felt harmless at first, but debt always demands repayment. Restlessness increased. Sleep became lighter. Night awakenings returned, not as peaceful intervals but as frustration. People checked clocks. Clock checking is a modern curse. Once you know the time, the mind calculates. How much sleep is left? How tired will I be? These calculations activate the brain. The brain does not sleep when it is solving problems. Thus began the loop. Trying to sleep prevented sleep. The more people chased rest, the further it moved away. And so sleep disorders rose, not because humans forgot how to sleep, but because they forgot how to let sleep happen. Medical language intensified the issue. Insomnia, sleep latency, sleep efficiency. Useful terms, but heavy ones. Labels create identity. I am a bad sleeper. I have insomnia. Once someone believes this, sleep becomes fragile. Every night feels like a test, and tests are stressful. Even relaxation techniques became tasks. Breathe correctly. Relax your muscles. Clear your mind. Trying to clear the mind keeps the mind busy. The paradox deepened. Sleep was now something you could fail at. And failure breeds fear. Fear tightens the nervous system. A tight nervous system does not sleep easily. This is how sleep anxiety was born, not from danger, but from control. Meanwhile, devices arrived. Trackers, apps, graphs. Sleep was measured every night. People woke up and checked their score. A number decided how they felt. Even if they felt okay, a low score convinced them otherwise. Sleep became externalized. Instead of asking the body, people asked the screen. The body's signals were overridden. This weakened trust. And sleep depends on trust. Trust in safety. Trust in letting go. Trust that nothing is required. But modern life rarely feels safe. Emails, notifications, deadlines. The night carried daytime stress into the bed. Thoughts raced. Sleep didn't come, and so pills appeared. First gently, then commonly. They worked, but imperfectly. They induced unconsciousness, not natural sleep. The body rested less deeply. Tolerance built. Dependence followed. Not everyone took pills, but everyone felt the pressure. Sleep had become a performance metric. Ironically, this happened while humanity had more comfort than ever before. Warm beds, quiet rooms, climate control. Yet restlessness increased. because comfort alone does not create sleep. Safety does, and safety is felt, not built. Here is the quiet truth. Sleep never left us. We walked away from it. We turned sleep into a goal, a task, a responsibility. But sleep is none of those. Sleep is a response to safety, to darkness, to stillness, to permission. The moment you stop demanding sleep, sleep notices. The moment you stop trying, the body begins. This is why sleep often arrives when you stop caring, on the couch, during a boring show, when you give up. Because surrender is sleep's doorway. As you lie here now, listening, not trying to sleep, notice something. Your breathing didn't need instructions. Your heartbeat didn't need effort. Sleep is the same. It happens when interference stops. You don't need perfect habits. You don't need the right number. You don't need control. You need allowance. This series was never about history alone. It was about remembering. Remembering that sleep is older than civilization, older than language, older than worry. Your body learned how to sleep long before your mind learned how to think. That knowledge is still there, waiting. Tonight doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be allowed. And if sleep doesn't come immediately, that's okay too. Rest is still rest. Lying quietly is still healing. The body takes what it needs when you stop arguing with it. So let this be the end. Not a conclusion, but a soft release. No lesson to apply. No rule to follow. Just a quiet understanding. Sleep is not something you do. Sleep is something that happens when you finally let go. Let the night hold you. Let the mind loosen. Nothing more is required.